The next time a bird looks directly at you, ask yourself a simple question. Is it seeing a human? Or is it seeing you? Because those are not the same thing. For decades, most people assumed birds lacked the intelligence to tell one person from another. We imagined that to a bird, every human was simply part of the background. But the reality is far stranger than that. Certain birds can remember individual faces, track specific people for years, teach those faces to other birds, and pass that information through entire social groups. Which means the birds in your yard may already know exactly who you are. The question is what they've learned. Because the evidence suggests that birds are not simply observing us. In many cases, they are building detailed memories of specific people, updating those memories over years, and even sharing that information with other birds. To understand how that's possible, we need to start with a simple fact. Birds are not just seeing you, they are studying you. You walk out to refill the feeder. A black-capped chickadee is in the nearby shrub. You notice it. You fill the seed. You go back inside, and you think nothing more of it. The chickadee has made a file on you. This is not a metaphor. Research published in the journal Animal Behavior and follow-up work from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has shown that songbirds engage in something researchers call individual recognition, the ability to distinguish one specific person from another based on visual cues, especially facial features. And what is remarkable is how early this process begins. Birds that regularly interact with humans, birds in yards, parks, and garden spaces, start building individual profiles from first encounter. They track your movement patterns. They note whether you approach predictably or erratically. They observe whether your presence at the feeder is followed by something calm or something threatening. Over repeated exposures, these observations crystallize into a stable impression that the bird holds on to. The house sparrow watching you from the gutter is not thinking in abstractions. It is updating a very specific data point. This person, here, today, did this. What this means for your yard is this. Every time you step outside, the birds already there are not starting from scratch. They are consulting a memory of you that was laid down weeks, maybe months, maybe longer ago. The way you move, whether you ever startled them, whether you filled the feeder when it was empty or let it stay dry for 3 days, it is all in there. There is something worth sitting with in that. Pay attention to this one, because most people miss it entirely. In a landmark study out of the University of Washington, researchers wore specific rubber masks while trapping and banding crows in a campus area. The crows were handled, briefly, harmlessly, and then released. When the same mask was worn again weeks later in the same area, the crows responded with alarm calls and dive-bombing behavior. When a different mask was worn, nothing. The crows had attached a threat response not to humans in general, but to that specific face. That alone is astonishing. But stay with me here, because it gets stranger. The threat memory did not stay private. Other crows in the area, crows that had never been trapped, never seen the mask up close, began responding to it with alarm. The information had moved. Researchers confirmed this across multiple seasons, watching the circle of crows that recognized and reacted to the threat mask grow steadily larger over time, without any of those new birds having personal experience with it. Crows have a social network, and face-based threat assessments travel through it. The University of Washington team, led by Dr. John Marsluff, documented this behavior across 5-year timelines. Offspring of the originally trapped crows were responding to the mask. Birds that had moved into the area after the original trapping period were responding. The memory of a specific face, attached to a specific event, had been culturally transmitted through a local crow population like a piece of news. This is not instinct. This is social learning. It is the kind of information sharing that we tend to associate with elephants, dolphins, primates. And it is happening in the trees above your street. If you have ever felt that the crows in your neighborhood watch you differently than they watch other people, you may not be imagining it. Most of us were taught, at some point, that birds have small, simple brains. This was the scientific consensus for a long time. It is no longer. Research published in Science in 2020 and work from the Avian Brain Nomenclature Consortium has fundamentally revised how neuroscientists think about the avian brain. Birds do not have a neocortex, the layered outer brain structure that mammals use for complex cognition. For decades, the absence of that structure was taken as evidence of cognitive simplicity. But birds have something functionally equivalent, a region of the avian brain called the pallium. and within it, a structure called the nidopallium quadrilateral turns out to perform many of the same executive functions that the mammalian prefrontal cortex handles: working memory, decision-making, flexible problem-solving, and crucially, long-term social memory. Corvids, the family that includes crows, ravens, jays, and jackdaws, have a pallial neuron density that rivals that of some primates. A raven's brain, ounce for ounce, is doing cognitive work at a level that we significantly underestimated for most of scientific history. But the face memory capacity is not limited to corvids. Research from the University of Exeter and from Cambridge has shown that robins, pigeons, and mockingbirds all demonstrate individual human recognition. These are not the birds you would intuitively put in the cognitive heavyweight category. And yet the recognition behavior is documented, repeatable, and consistent. What this means for your yard is this: the robin that returns to your garden each spring is not just returning to a general territory. It is returning, in part, to a set of individuals it already knows. You may be one of them. There is a research study from the University of Florida that I think about often. Scientists had observers approach mockingbird nests in a controlled way. Some observers touched the nest. Others stood nearby but did not touch. The same individuals returned to the same nest areas over multiple days. What happened was precise and deliberate. The mockingbirds directed their alarm responses: dive bombing, vocalizations, wing-spreading threat displays, specifically at the individuals who had touched the nest. The non-threatening visitors were largely left alone. On day 1, the threat recognition required the birds to get close enough to confirm identity. By day 4, the mockingbirds were beginning their threat response earlier, intercepting the known threat individual at a greater distance before any close approach was possible. The birds had not just remembered a face, they had calibrated their response over time, becoming more efficient at the interception. A grudge is not quite the right word, but it is in the neighborhood. What researchers noted was that this behavior persisted beyond the nesting season. The individual recognition did not dissolve when the immediate threat to the nest was gone. It was retained and associated with that person. If you have ever had a mockingbird that seems specifically and inexplicably aggressive toward you while leaving your neighbors alone, there is a good chance you did something near its nest at some point. You may not remember it. The mockingbird absolutely does. This is the one that tends to land differently once you fully understand it. You have probably had the experience of a bird getting comfortable with your presence, a chickadee that stops flushing when you step outside, a nuthatch that stays on the feeder while you stand nearby, filling the other feeder beside it, a titmouse that lands within a few feet of where you are sitting, going about its business as if you are not a concern. That comfort did not happen by default. It happened because the bird built a record of you across multiple encounters and arrived at a specific assessment. This individual does not represent a threat. Research from the University of Exeter showed that garden birds, particularly species that regularly encounter the same humans, demonstrate measurable, individually specific habituation. They do not generalize the calm response to all humans. If a stranger comes into the yard, the titmouse that ignores you will flush from that stranger at full normal escape distance. The trust is not for the category of person. It is for you. Cornell lab work on feeder birds has shown this individually targeted habituation developing over periods as short as a few weeks of regular, calm contact. The bird is watching how you move, whether you make direct eye contact, whether you stop and stare or pass with predictable, non-threatening movement, whether you fill the feeder reliably, whether you ever, once, did something startling. The chickadee that lands near you has decided something. It has weighed the accumulated evidence of your behavior and concluded that you are not a threat. That is a cognitive act. It required memory, pattern recognition, and a decision applied to a specific individual. You, based on your specific history together. There is real warmth in that if you let it land. Think about the birds in your yard right now. Think about the ones that stay when you walk outside and the ones that flush. Those are two different assessments of two different behavioral records. One bird has decided you are safe. The other has not. And both of them are right, based on the evidence they have. You have a relationship with the wildlife in your yard. Not a general one. Individual ones. Built over time. Held in memory by creatures whose inner lives we are only beginning to understand. That bird at your feeder at the start of this video, the one that has been watching you for months, it is still there. And now that you know what it is actually doing when it looks at you, the image shifts. It is not scanning you as a vague environmental element. It is checking in on a specific individual that it has a history with. It is running a recognition process that took weeks to build and may last years. It is deciding, in that small, quick moment, how close it will allow itself to be. You are not just a person with a feeder in a yard. You are a known individual to the animals that live beside you. They have formed opinions. They have shared some of those opinions. They have updated their behavior toward you specifically, based on the specific things you have specifically done. That is not a small thing. To be known, even a little, by a wild creature. To be distinguished from the anonymous mass of human presence and placed in a category the bird has built for you alone. That is a form of contact that most people walk past every day without ever realizing it is happening. The birds in your yard know what you look like. They have known for a long time. And that knowledge, it turns out, means something. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a bird that seemed to recognize you specifically, or one that seemed to hold a grudge? I genuinely want to know what you've seen. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.